I would now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I might note for the record that without whistleblowers, including the update the President recently signed, my committee next door could not operate. We depend on whistleblowers. And in fact, Fast and Furious, Benghazi, the IRS scandal, and right now next door, the manipulation that went on in what was disclosed when the Park Service complained they wouldn't have enough money for toilet paper, all of that was exposed and more by whistleblowers. So I want to commend whistleblowers. I would prefer they come to Congress. I would prefer they trust my committee. But notwithstanding that, if it's the New York Times they feel they have to go to, then I'll read the New York Times. With that, I'd like to read an older quote for a moment to begin my questioning. Congressman Davy Crockett, famously in 1835, when speaking and coining the phrase log rolling, "My people don't like me to log roll in their business. To vote away their preemption rights to fellows in other states that never kindled a fire in their own land." He was talking about Congress doing quid pro quo, to use a different term. Mr. Spakowski, in the case of Mr. Perez and his going to St. Paul and trading away $200 million of taxpayer potential money, and in return for dismissing effectively or killing a Supreme Court case, one that might have been decided in a way he didn't like, wasn't he in fact log rolling through his administrative power?
I think he was, and I think it was another example of, frankly, something that Mr. Adams and I saw a lot, and that is the inability of individuals going to work in the Civil Rights Division, particularly individuals from liberal advocacy organizations, being able to make the transition to being a government lawyer and understanding that their clients were now the American public and the American taxpayer. Instead, many of them go to work for the Civil Rights Division and continue to push and advocate the same kind of policies and legal positions that they did at those organizations, and they don't make the transition. I think this is an example of that.
Now, the same court, the exact same court that decided Obamacare would have decided this civil rights question on behalf of people who felt that, poor people in a city who felt that they should have better solutions than the status quo of calculation. Do you trust that Supreme Court?
Well, I do, and it's very clear that this whole deal was done because Mr. Perez believed that the Supreme Court, and a lot of legal commentators agreed, was going to toss out these legal theories that was being used. And it's important to remember the whole issue here was over a city falsely certifying that it was going to use millions of dollars to help low-income individuals, and they falsely certified to doing that.
So I think one of the more important questions that I need to get answered is, if you, in fact, bribe a city into dropping a case in return for dropping another case, or log rolling, to use Davy Crockett, because quid pro quo sounds way too highfalutin, and I think the gentleman from Tennessee would be more appropriate to quote. If in fact that were to continue, wouldn't we basically have any number of things? I'll give you a new courthouse in your district. I'll bring stimulus funds. Wouldn't there be almost a limitless things the executive branch could do in return for having the courts not see cases they didn't want and see cases they wanted?
Yeah, I think that would be the start of a long trend of doing that.
And isn't the fact that that case is now basically dead, doesn't that mean that we have an inconsistency? We have one part of the country that, one circuit that has one rule and others that may have another. In other words, the lack of a clear decision could be years before we have one law of the land.
That's true, and one of the worst things that all lawyers will tell you is to have inconsistent views and opinions from different courts in the country.
Now, from the IG report, and Mr. Nadler mentioned the OIG in the other case, but I just want you to help me with something that was said in the OIG report, and I'll quote it. Nevertheless, this is as to Thomas Perez. Nevertheless, we found that Perez's testimony did not reflect the entire story regarding the involvement of political appointees in NBPP decision-making. And then they again say, we believe that Perez should have sought more details from King and Rosenbaum about the nature and extent of participation of political appointees, etc. Now, you're more technical than I am. Would you say that that's not a lie, but it's not the whole truth?
What I would say about that is my job as counsel to the Assistant Attorney General previously was to help prepare my boss, people like Mr. Perez, for testimony before hearings like this and before the Commission. We would have briefed him on every aspect of that case and gotten all of the information necessary to answer every question, particularly a question like that, which Perez told the IG he anticipated the question.
So what you're saying is he didn't tell the whole truth, and that was part of what he was sworn to do.
I believe that's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman.